What is up, party people? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Jamila. This is JemilaBeReadin, because I do be reading. And in this video, we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in November. So in November, I read a little bit more than I've come to have as my typical monthly amount of reads, at least for this year. This year has definitely slowed down my reading, I feel like, quite a bit from the past few years. I still feel like I'm reading a lot, but just not as much as I used to. And so this month I read 10 books. I feel like on average I tend around 5 to 6 books a month. But I did attempt to do a 24-hour readathon, which helped me read some more books. And that 24-hour readathon will not be seeing the light of day because I didn't like how it ended up. So I did read these books and I did film, and I just didn't like how it turned out. So Let's move on. Starting off with a book where I read the majority of it in October, but I did finish it at the beginning of November. So I'm just gonna count it here in this November wrap up. And that is Against the Loveless World by Susan Abulhawa. This is a book by a Palestinian author. I guess you would consider this kind of historical fiction. It has multiple timelines. So at the beginning of this book, we are in the present day with our main character, Nahar. She is in solitary confinement in an Israeli prison, and we kind of get the recounting of her life story. We are mainly within the past, you know, with her story, and then at the beginning of kind of the different parts of this novel, we flash forward to the present, where we get some observations and kind of thoughts from present day. So it's really a character-driven story. There isn't a ton of plot. It's kind of just a look at this one character, her entire life from when she was a young teenager all the way to how she ended up in solitary confinement in this Israeli prison. We are spanning multiple different countries. We start first in Kuwait, then go to Jordan, then Palestine, then back to Jordan, then back to Palestine. And it's just truly one of the best books I've ever read. Let me just tell you right now, it's a 5-star. This is going to be within the top books that I read in the year. And Susan Abulhawa is truly just like a phenomenal writer. So beautiful. I am not someone that usually tabs books when I'm reading, but I did tab it. And these were all just lines that I thought were really beautifully written. I mean, I just flipped to this random page on 88. Let me read this to you. There was a deeply felt dignity in the sense that one's shelter and sustenance were not mortgaged. We went where we could not have afforded before the invasion, walked into homes where we'd never been invited, and into establishments that would not have welcomed us during normal times. No one was poor, no one was rich. We just were, and we shared. We ate, we drank, we laughed, we danced, we cried. We dreamed and imagined a better world. Then we waited for fate to fall on our heads from American warplanes. I loved this book so much. I found Nahar to be such a compelling and really interesting protagonist. I thought the way it was written was so compelling. I couldn't put this down. It almost felt like a page turner, which I know it's not usually the type of book that would be considered a page turner, but I just felt so invested in Nahar and her life and all of these characters, and it was just so interesting. And I also think what the author does really well is develop these really interesting relationships. I think the one that stood out the most to me was between Nahar and this older woman who kind of ends up being her pimp. She kind of ends up getting tricked into sex work early in her life, and they have such an interesting friendship. And considering all the things that were done to Nahar, kind of by this woman, like this deep love and affection she ends up having for her, it's just so interesting and fascinating. Highly, highly recommend this. You gotta check it out. I just loved it. Then I listened to the audiobook for The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. This is her recently released memoir, And I kind of struggled to rate this one. I think I'm actually going to leave it unrated. I think memoirs are a little bit tricky because it feels kind of weird to, I guess, give a star rating to someone's life. For me, like, I am willing to give star ratings and review memoirs just because when I'm doing that, I'm not, judging their story. I'm looking at how the book was constructed, how it was written, the reflection and introspection, how well it conveyed what it wanted to convey, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'm not a big memoir reader at all. I've only read a handful, and I think I would say I enjoyed all of the ones that I've read so far. And I did enjoy this one. I think enjoy is kind of a weird word to say considering all the things that Britney Spears has gone through. It was so interesting to read a memoir from someone that I had been like closely following for a lot of my life. I grew up like a Britney fan. I was kind of closely following this whole conservatorship situation. And, I was very young when a lot of the stuff was going down. In terms of kind of like her fall from grace before she ended up getting into the conservatorship. But I remember seeing it a lot in magazines and watching it. It's just so interesting to get this perspective now, as I'm older, and also with just more insight that's being given by Britney. And like I said, I'm going to keep it unrated, but I don't know that I would necessarily say it didn't work for me. This book is very simply written. It's very straightforward. I would say pretty linear in its storytelling, and I don't have a problem with that. I think it did what it needed to do. I think we did get some reflection and some deeper insight on some of these kind of notable moments in her life. The audiobook is not narrated by her. It's narrated by Michelle Williams, the actress, not the singer that was in Destiny's Child. And I think she did a fantastic job. And Britney actually did narrate the introduction and explain that she was not going to be narrating the rest of the book just because it was very painful for her, which is totally understandable. And despite the fact that, she wasn't the one who narrated her audiobook, I still feel like I got like a sense of her voice, her narrative voice in this, which I appreciated. But I would say like overall, typically what I would want out of a memoir, or a memoir that I would think is effective, includes a lot more introspection and reflection. And I just don't know that we could necessarily get there considering how close to it Britney is. Like, she just got out of her conservatorship. She's still kind of going through things. She's still unlearning things. She's unpacking her own trauma. She also recently, unfortunately, had a miscarriage. Now she is separated from her partner. There's still a lot of things kind of going on, and I would be interested to see if she writes a like follow-up memoir when she's maybe 10, maybe even 15 years down the line, when she's older and has had more of her life outside of this conservatorship and has been able to process more of her trauma, and then reflecting on it again. I think that would be interesting to see. But overall, I really enjoyed it. Again, enjoyed is a weird word to say, but I liked it, and I think it's worth a listen, especially if you were someone who was a Britney fan or just like kind of grew up around that time. Definitely check it out. In a complete like tonal shift, the next book I read was actually Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I am not a Fourth Wing fan, and I honestly think it's kind of a train wreck that I can't look away from. Now, I don't support Rebecca Yarros as an author. She has said and posted kind of some weird both sidesy nonsense about the genocide that's happening in Palestine. She's also recently had this kind of debacle surrounding the Scottish Gaelic words that were being used in her book. She called them Gaelic, which is the Irish dialect, and also pronounced it a lot of these things wrong. So there was that. And there's just like this kind of underlying pro-military stuff in this book, and the fact that she like writes a lot of military romances. Her life is very much entrenched with and surrounded by the military. and just what I find to be poor representation of disability and this kind of toxic perseverance that I find kind of entrenched in the books. There's a lot. I also just think like on a very basic fundamental level, Fourth Wing and Iron Flame were very poorly written. It is some of the worst world building that I've ever had the displeasure of experiencing, and I just think a lot of it is kind of nonsensical. But like I said, it is like a bit of a train wreck that I cannot look away from, and especially with the whole thing that came out with Red Tower and all of the misprints and just the low quality of the actual physical book of Iron Flame and this like rushed publishing schedule. It's fascinating in a terrible way, and which is part of the reason why I picked up Iron Flame. I didn't purchase it. I got it from my library, but I was just so curious to see how this second book would follow, considering how poor the world building was. And I knew it's supposed to be a 5-book series, and I just couldn't envision like how, I just knew it would probably fall apart really quickly because it didn't have like a foundation to stand on. And then also the main characters get together in the first book, and I'm like, how is this supposed to last for 5 books? Anyways, all that to say, Iron Flame was a 1-star. I really did not like it. It was significantly worse than Fourth Wing, which is saying something because that was already bad to begin with. And yeah, let's just leave it at that. All right, I picked up an adult contemporary novel next, and that is Tastes Like Shakkar by Nisha Sharma. This is the second book in the, I think it's If Shakespeare Was an Auntie series, the first book being Dating Dr. Dill. These like are interconnected standalones, and we're actually following friends that were mentioned in the first book. Bobby, who is a wedding planner, and Bunty, who is like a restaurateur / rich guy whose family owns like this like frozen naan business. And they had a very poor first meeting with each other, and ever since then Bobby has hated Bunty, and it's just awkward because like they're in similar friend groups and they have to come together because their friends who got together in the first book are getting married, and Bobby's actually planning the wedding, and Bunty is now going to be catering, and they have to come together. And on top of that, there's like someone trying to sabotage this wedding, so they're trying to figure that out as well. And then they're also going through their own individual like personal stories and growth that they have to go through. When I first started reading this, I'd say probably for like the first third, I thought that I was actually enjoying this more than Dating Dr. Dill, which I also enjoyed, but I felt like I was enjoying this more. But then I'm not sure that I loved the romantic relationship development. I felt like a lot of it actually happened off screen. We also had a lot, they were kind of long distance for part of this, and so a lot of their communication was happening through text. And, you know, I love an epistolary moment. I don't think that a relationship can't develop that way. But I don't feel like there was a lot of, like, tangible romance development texts happening. And then when they would meet together for, like, a getaway or the bachelor party, where this would be moments for them to really like deepen their relationship, we'd have like one scene, and then the next chapter is like a week had passed and we had a great time, and I'm like, why are we not getting a little bit more of this? These are great moments for them to have deeper like connections and showing us the progression of their relationship. So I found that to be a little bit odd. I still enjoyed this, and I liked their individual like personal arcs that they went through. But yeah, I don't know that I really loved the romantic aspect of this. They're sweet together, you know, but I wanted more of that development happening on page. So I landed on like a 3.5 for this one. So I share an Amazon account with my friends, so we have access to the same Kindle library. And my friend had downloaded a bunch of graphic novels for a project that they were working on for school. They're in grad school for library sciences. And she downloaded one of these graphic novels, and I was so curious by the title, so I just picked it up one morning. It was a weekend morning. I had literally just woken up and I was like kind of looking, and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna read this right now. I was like, I'm curious, I'm gonna go and see. And it was just so endearing and fun, and I really liked it, and it was very funny. So I ended up just reading it in one sitting, and that's The Princess and the Grilled Cheese Sandwich by Dea Muniz. And I think this is the first from this artist slash author. I think they're from Brazil, and I think they have like some online stuff that they do, but this is the first thing that got published. Okay, also it's like set in a world where like everything is named after cheese, so that was great. We have Lady Camembert, who wants to live life on her own terms without marriage. Well, at least not marrying a man, you know? And the law of the land is that women cannot inherit. So when her father passes away, they prior to him passing, they like concoct this plan for Lady Camembert to disguise herself as a man and become Count Camembert. So that happens. She's told to keep a low profile, but she's really silly goofy, you know? She's loud and audacious. And she meets the beautiful Princess Brie, and they have like a great sense of activism, and like they love fashion, so they like talk about it a lot. And it was so cute. It was a really good time. I really enjoyed the art style. If you just want something like quick and fun and cozy, something that's very heartwarming, you need to check this out. I was clearly still in a romance kick. I picked up Will You Be Mine by Rilsey Adams. This is the second in the Falling Like a Johnson interconnected standalone series. I hadn't picked up a Rilsey Adams in a while, and I wanted something quick. And you know, this is probably my least favorite of Rilsey Adams. Honestly, I don't even recall what this book is about. I've been sitting here just like, what, like not even looking. I didn't want to look at the description because I was like, what did I even read? What did I read? Now looking at the description, it's bringing back memories. So J.T. Johnson has been in love with his best friend for as long as he can remember. Hallie, however, seems clueless or deliberately obtuse. When she asks him to pretend to be her boyfriend for her ex-best friend's wedding, J.T. hesitantly agrees. Will their escape to the Caribbean be heaven or hell in paradise? This was fine. Yeah, this was fine. That's all I gotta say. I gave this one a 3-star. Moving on to something that was the opposite of just fine. Something that was amazing, show-stopping, never been done, extraordinary, chef's kiss. And that is To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Blackgoose. This was so good. This is what I've been needing, you know? We're following our main protagonist, 15-year-old Anna Koos, who has been living on the remote island of Muskopog, and they haven't seen dragons for many generations. There are other types of dragons in this world, mainly in what you would consider to be the West, or like Europe, and they have like military, like dragon academy schools, and she ends up finding a hatchling on her island, and it hatches and it chooses her to be its companion / rider. And because of laws and stuff, because there's been colonization on this island, she has to go to this dragon academy to learn how to be a dragon rider and follow their rules and laws. And she gets kind of thrust into this world of like high society and etiquette and what's proper. She's dealing with a lot of racism and just like the effects of colonialism. I should mention that she is indigenous, and yeah, she hasn't had any kind of like formal schooling in this Western sense, and she's just kind of it's kind of your typical like fish out of water story. And what I think that's so unique and so just like amazing to me is how steadfast Anacus is in herself, in her beliefs and moral compass, and in her culture and her people. I think in a lot of these types of stories where you have a fish out of water. Okay, my camera died in the middle of me going on about my love for To Shape a Dragon's Breath. I'm filming this on my iPhone. Hopefully the quality is still fine. Hopefully the volume is still okay. I'm gonna speak up a little bit more. I think what I was saying about this is typically in these kinds of fish out of water stories, or where someone is coming from a marginalized place into a space where they're like unwelcome, or it's like the colonizers or the racists or whatever. There's like a moment I feel like in a lot of these stories where they like feel like they're trying to assimilate or join them or be accepted by them. But you don't get that at all in this book. I just loved how sure of herself Anacus was, and at no point did she feel any shame about herself or her culture. She never once tried to really fit in. She really was only there because she had to be, and she was there to just learn and use what she needed and get the hell out of Dodge, you know what I mean? And she just like looked at other people like they were weird, because they were. She's like, y'all are the weird ones, not me. You guys are the ones who are acting terribly, not me. And I just loved that. I just loved experiencing that. She was truly such a delight of a character. She is so clever and very kind, and I just loved her. I could go on and on about how much I loved Anacus as a character. I loved the side characters. Get a little bit of a poly action potentially here, which I loved. I just loved everything about this book. And if you, not to bring it back to Fourth Wing, but if you read Fourth Wing and wanted something that involved dragons in a school setting, and fighting back actually against colonialism, and you were extremely dissatisfied with Fourth Wing, I highly encourage you to pick this one up. Just in general, everybody should pick this one up. I loved it so much. Another one that's probably going to be in my top books of the year. During that 24-hour readathon that is not going to be aired, I picked up The Art of Scandal by Regina Black. I believe this is her debut. I've been seeing this a lot in my reading circles. A lot of people loving this one. It's blurbed by Tia Williams, who wrote 7 Days in June, which is one of my favorite romances of all time. And it just sounded deliciously dramatic, you know, and I was very excited to get into it. And I think I land somewhere around like a 3.75. I enjoyed this. I read it in almost one sitting, certainly in the 24 hours. And yeah, I think it's well written for the most part, like in terms of actual like grammar structure and stuff. It was well written. But I don't know, this just didn't really leave a lasting impact on me. Like, I just haven't really thought about it since I finished reading it. Basically, this is about Rachel. She is the wife of a politician. I believe he's the mayor. Yeah, he's the mayor. He is like a rising star. He really wants to make it to the White House at some point. Important to note that this is an interracial relationship. He's a wealthy white man who was brought up by wealthy people, and she's a Black woman who grew up kind of poor. She was a single mother, a teen mother at that, and kind of like a part of their story to the public is how he kind of just like saved her, kind of, I don't know, took her daughter in, you know, treated her as her own, and he's like super woke or whatever. But on her husband's 40th birthday, she receives a dick pic of all things. And she quickly realizes that it was not intended for her. It was intended for his side piece. Okay, he is cheating on her, and you know, she wants to divorce, but he is very much about keeping up appearances because he's in the middle of a campaign. So she decides to stay with him, but they're like not together. And she wanted, you know, she didn't sign a prenup either, so she like wants money out of this, rightfully so. She like put her whole career on hold for him, and she meets a young man, someone who was like, I think 9 or 10 years her junior, 26 years old, Nathan Vasquez, who is an artist. And she ends up deciding to have a little side piece of her own. And we're just kind of following their romance and her kind of finding herself again, like becoming the person that she used to be. Yeah, and like a lot of reconnecting with art and stuff like that. I like feel like this should have been it for me. But again, for some reason, it just didn't fully come together for me. And I just like have not thought about it. I will check out more from this author if she writes more. But yeah, didn't love this one. Also for that 24-hour readathon was The Fake Mate by Lana Ferguson. You know, I got this from the Berkeley Influencer program. And I was like, oh, I feel like a little like office romance that deals with werewolves sounds like a fun time. Little did I know that this is actually Omegaverse. So there was that. So yeah, there was descriptions that you would think of when you think of the Omegaverse. Despite that, this was fine. I gave it a 3-star. I liked the main girl. She's like a little quirky, but like in a way that kind of worked for me. And the guy was fine too. You know, I didn't hate anybody, which is actually a really good sign. You'd be surprised how many romances I read where I end up disliking one or both or multiple of the people involved in the romance. So, you know, it was a good sign that I was not bothered by either people. And I liked the romance. I thought it was cute. And I think the whole like plot was a little convoluted, but it was fine. And finally, I was rereading during some of these and finished it up in that 24-hour readathon. Hench, like I said, this is a reread for me. I initially gave it a 4-star. I would also stick with that rating, but despite the fact that it's a 4-star, I have like a 5-star love for this book. The reason why it's a 4-star is because I think it is so weirdly paced, and because of that, I think it loses you a little bit in the middle, and then I think the themes could have hit more if we had a little better pace. That being said, I love this book. I love this book. I think I've talked about this before, maybe not on here, but certainly over on TikTok, which plug, go follow me over there. But this is a book that I would recommend to people who already enjoy superhero content and want like a very interesting reflection on superheroes. If you're someone that likes The Boys or Invincible, I think you would enjoy this. But just in general, for anyone that tends to enjoy superhero content, in this world, like superheroes and supervillains exist, right? And there's temp agencies for henches, for supervillains. And she is a temp. She does a lot of odd jobs for supervillains, usually in terms of like data analysis, very boring spreadsheets types of things. And one day she's working for a particular supervillain, and she gets some live action. You know, she's someone that just likes to be in her little cave on her computer doing her little data analysis, you know what I mean? But she ends up being in the middle of some villainry, okay? And the main superhero, Super Collider, think Superman, okay? He comes and just you know, really by accident, without much thought, kind of like, but he's like super strong, right? And so she goes flying, bro. She's like, breaks like every single bone in her leg. Like, she's rocked. She's fucked, okay? Like, she is permanently disabled from this situation. And she's pissed, you know, rightfully so. She's like, and she like also just like in that, she's like witnessing just like all of this casual, easy murder that's happening against just henches, like temp henches, you know what I mean? And so she has it in her mind to start using her data analysis skills to evaluate how much damage and like collateral damage superheroes are actually causing, and showing how they're actually causing more harm than good. And so she posts this on a blog, and it catches the attention of the supervillain, Leviathan. And she ends up working for him, and she kind of gets her own department, and they're all working to cause just, you know, problems. No peace, just problems for superheroes. And in particular, it ends up turning into trying to take down Super Collider. And it's just a really interesting like exploration of honestly like abolition a little bit, and just like that moral grain. Like, what does it mean to be good? What does it mean to be bad? The choices that people make, and how it could lead people down these paths, and even like how these superheroes like kind of cause their own supervillains. It's just so interesting and fascinating, and it's such a rich world with very rich and well-developed side characters. And I loved Anna as a character as well too. And it's just so interesting. And this is supposed to get a second book that that got pushed multiple times. You know, it was supposed to come out last year. Didn't come out. Then they said this year, fall of 2023. Hello, it's almost the end of the year. And then now on Goodreads, it says September of 2024, but there's just like no mention of it anywhere. It's not listed on the publisher's website. I have scoured the author's social medias to see if they've talked about it anymore, and I haven't seen anything. So I don't know when the sequel is coming, but I want it and I need it, and I'm just hoping that it actually comes out next year. So those are all the books that I read in November. Let me know what you all read. Let me know what your best books have been in November. And I'd love to know, what are your plans for the rest of the year? Any New Year's resolutions? Let me know. And I'll see y'all in the next video.